The dust from the spring trappers' arrival still hung in the air at Bear Creek Trading Post when Emma heard the impossible words that would change everything. She stood in the dim back room where Silas Henderson conducted his private business, facing a man whose legend preceded him like thunder before a storm. Nathaniel Bridger, the mountain man who'd survived winters that killed stronger men, looked at her with eyes that held both determination and defeat. His proposition cut through her shock like a blade through buckskin. 1 year of marriage. 1 child. In exchange, everything he'd built in 15 years of trapping would be hers. Emma was 24 years old, with hands scarred from endless mending and a future that looked like a slowly closing trap. Her Aunt Ruth lay dying in the adjacent room, each rattling breath a reminder that Emma's only protector in this harsh world was slipping away. Without Ruth, there would be no reason for Silas to let Emma stay at the trading post. No room, no work, no place in a frontier that had little mercy for women alone. The mountains held beauty, but they held cruelty too, and Emma had seen both sides clearly. Now this weathered stranger stood before her, offering something that sounded too calculated to be real. He spoke with the bluntness of a man who'd stopped pretending about hard truths. He had maybe a year left, the doctor at Fort Laramie had told him. A growth in his liver that no medicine could cure. He needed an heir to inherit his mountain empire, needed it to be legitimate, so there'd be no disputes. He'd been watching Emma for days, had asked Silas about her situation, and decided she fit his requirements. Strong, capable, alone. Emma's mind spun like leaves in a dust devil. This wasn't a marriage proposal built on affection. This was a transaction, cold as January wind off the peaks. Give him a child before death claimed him, and she'd inherit a fortune in furs, a solid cabin in the high country, and a future that wouldn't leave her dependent on anyone's charity. The practical side of her saw the brutal logic, but something deeper recoiled from the coldness of it. Nathaniel didn't rush her for an answer. He simply laid out the terms. He'd pay for Ruth's medical care, get her the best doctor within a week's travel, ensure she had comfort for whatever time remained. Emma would come to his mountain cabin as his legal wife. When he died, everything would pass to her and the child. No promises of love, no false romance. Just honest necessity between two people who both needed something the other could provide. That night, Emma lay beside Ruth's labored breathing and felt the weight of impossible choices. What kind of future waited for her here? More years of sewing and cooking for rough men, growing older and more invisible, until she became like the other forgotten women at the post. But what Nathaniel offered felt like selling something essential. Yet as she listened to Ruth struggle for each breath, she understood that pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. Ruth made the decision easier the next morning after another violent coughing fit. Her aunt gripped Emma's hand with surprising strength and spoke words that cut through all doubts. This man was offering life, offering security in a world that offered women like them nothing. Take the offer, Ruth urged. Take the future he's giving you. Let me die knowing you'll be safe. Emma found Nathaniel that evening outside the trading post, smoking a pipe and watching stars emerge over the mountains. Her conditions were simple but firm. Ruth would have the best care money could buy. Emma would raise the child as she saw fit, teaching kindness alongside survival. And she wanted to know more about where they'd be living. Nathaniel agreed to everything without hesitation, describing his mountain cabin with unexpected poetry. A solid place near the Continental Divide, built to withstand the worst winters, isolated but beautiful, with forest full of game and a spring that never ran dry. They were married the next morning in a ceremony so brief it felt almost like a dream. The preacher's words washed over Emma like cold water as she became Mrs. Nathaniel Bridgers. Ruth had insisted on being carried to the ceremony, and Emma clung to that image of her aunt's proud smile. Nathaniel paid the doctor in gold coins, arranged for Ruth to have a clean room in Henderson's house, and within days they were preparing to leave for the high country. The journey into the mountains stripped away everything familiar. Nathaniel led on his Appaloosa stallion, while Emma followed on a gentle mare. 3 pack mules trailing behind, loaded with supplies. They traveled through country that grew progressively wilder. Nathaniel proved patient despite their arrangement, showing Emma how to cross swift streams, pointing out landmarks that would guide her if she ever needed to find her way alone. Each night, they camped in places Nathaniel had used for years, and slowly Emma began to see the mountains through his eyes. He spoke about the wilderness with genuine reverence, describing favorite hunting grounds and places where he'd weathered storms. There was love in his voice when he talked about this country. He told her about coming west after the War of 1812, a restless 17-year-old who wanted freedom more than safety. On the second night, Emma asked about Singing Bird, Nathaniel's first wife. His face softened with memory as he described the Shoshone woman who'd saved his life during his second winter. She'd been the chief's niece, beautiful and capable. They'd built a life together following trap lines. When fever took her during childbirth 12 years ago, taking their son with her, Nathaniel had thrown himself into the wilderness like a man trying to outrun grief. Emma felt unexpected sympathy for this man, who'd arranged their marriage like a business deal. Beneath the practical surface was someone who'd loved deeply and lost everything. Maybe they weren't so different after all. On the 5th day, they encountered a crow hunting party. Emma's heart hammered with fear until she saw how the warriors greeted Nathaniel like a brother. The leader, Spotted Elk, studied Emma before placing his hand over his heart and speaking words Nathaniel translated. Any woman of Nathaniel Bridger was a friend to the Crow people. Spotted Elk gave Emma a medicine pouch and spoke in careful English. "Mountain women know strength. Your child will be strong like father." Emma was startled because she'd told no one about possible pregnancy, but Spotted Elk just smiled knowingly. They reached Nathaniel's cabin on the 7th day. It sat in a high valley surrounded by pine forest, solid and well-built, with real glass windows. Inside was more comfortable than she'd hoped, a main room with a stone fireplace, a separate bedroom, shelves lined with supplies and books. Nathaniel had built this 12 years ago after Singing Bird died, needing a permanent base. It was clear he'd built hoping for a future that never came. If this story moves you so far, show some love with a like and keep listening. The days that followed established a rhythm that felt almost normal. Nathaniel rose before dawn to hunt or check traps, while Emma tended the cabin and learned skills she'd never imagined needing. He taught her to shoot his rifle despite the brutal recoil, insisting she needed to defend herself. He showed her how to skin and stretch furs, make pemmican, read weather signs in the clouds. His patience surprised her. They worked side by side, moving around each other in the small cabin with increasing ease. Their conversations during meals began to deepen beyond practical matters. Nathaniel told her about his journey west, about seeing the Rocky Mountains for the first time. Emma spoke about her childhood, about Ruth teaching her that survival meant being useful. She admitted she'd never thought she'd have a chance at anything better than the trading post, and something in Nathaniel's eyes shifted when she said it. Their nights together started as pure transaction, both fulfilling the terms of their agreement. Yet even these encounters began to change subtly. There was less awkwardness, more gentleness. Moments afterward, when Nathaniel would lie beside her and they'd talk in the darkness, Emma began to see past his weathered exterior to the thoughtful, lonely man beneath. It was late June when Emma first suspected she carried his child. She waited 2 weeks to be certain before telling him. They sat on the porch after supper, watching sunset paint the mountain peaks gold and pink. When Emma spoke the words quietly, Nathaniel went very still. Then his face softened completely. He reached for her hand and held it like something precious. "Thank you," he said with roughness in his voice. That night was different. When Nathaniel came to her, there was tenderness that hadn't existed before, and afterward he lay beside her with one hand resting on her belly. He told her that he'd thought of their arrangement as purely practical, but these months had given him more than he'd bargained for. She'd made his cabin feel like a home. Emma felt tears as she admitted the mountains had given her something too. Something profound had shifted. What began as a cold transaction was becoming real and warm. Summer brought breathtaking beauty but also brought the reality of Nathaniel's illness pressing closer. He moved more slowly now, his face often drawn with pain. He began teaching her everything with renewed intensity, showing her his hidden caches throughout the mountains, introducing her to more crow hunting parties. Spotted Elk promised his people would watch over Nathaniel's woman after he was gone. By early September, Nathaniel could no longer hide his deteriorating condition. The pain was constant. Emma did everything to make him comfortable, preparing foods he could keep down, brewing teas that dulled the pain. One evening he spoke about gratitude, about how these months with Emma had been an unexpected gift, how he'd prepared to die alone and instead was dying a loved man. Emma realized with a jolt that she did love him. She didn't know exactly when it had happened, couldn't point to a specific moment when duty had transformed into something deeper. But it was real. She told him so one night, and Nathaniel's eyes grew bright as he admitted he loved her too, more than he'd thought possible. They held each other in the darkness and mourned the future they wouldn't have while treasuring the present they'd built. The first heavy snows came in late November, and Nathaniel could no longer rise from bed without help. Emma moved through those days with fierce determination, caring for him with steady hands. On a bitter December night, he woke her with quiet urgency. "It's coming soon," he said. He needed her to know that these months had been a gift. He'd been prepared to die alone, and instead, he was dying loved. Emma had made everything worth it. Christmas came quietly. They sat together by the fire, his head on her shoulder, her hand on her swollen belly where their child moved. Nathaniel felt the baby's movements with wonder. On the first day of January, as a winter storm howled outside, Emma went into labor. The labor lasted through the day and into the night, but finally, as dawn broke on January 2nd, the baby was born. A boy, small but healthy, with powerful lungs. Emma cleaned him and wrapped him in warm blankets, then carried him to Nathaniel's bedside. At the baby's cry, Nathaniel's eyes opened. Emma placed their son in his father's arms and watched as Nathaniel looked at his child for the first and last time. Tears ran down his weathered face. "He's perfect," Nathaniel whispered. "Jacob! Our Jacob!" For several minutes, father and son simply looked at each other. Nathaniel kissed his son's forehead, then let Emma take him back. "Love where this is going? Drop a comment and let us know." She settled Jacob in his cradle, then returned to lay beside her husband one final time. Nathaniel gathered what strength remained to hold her close. "Thank you for everything," he whispered. "You've given me the best ending I could have asked for." They lay together as winter dawn grew brighter, as little Jacob slept. Nathaniel's breathing grew slower until finally, peacefully, it stopped. Emma held him for a long time, crying silently, saying goodbye to the man who'd given her so much in such a short time. The months that followed were the hardest of Emma's life. She had a newborn to care for, a husband she couldn't bury until spring thaw, and the stark reality of being alone in a mountain cabin in winter. But she also had everything Nathaniel had given her: his teachings, his preparations, his love, his faith in her strength. She wrapped his body and placed it in the cold barn. She cared for Jacob, who thrived despite everything. She kept the fire going and moved through her grief with the strength Nathaniel had always said she possessed. Spring finally came. As soon as the ground thawed, Emma dug a grave on a hillside overlooking the valley. She buried him with his rifle and knife, as was mountain man custom, and carved a marker from pine. Nathaniel Bridger, mountain man, 1803 to 1843, beloved husband and father. He lived free and died loved. She planted wildflowers around the grave and promised she'd tend it every week. Then Emma walked back to the cabin, to Jacob, to the life she now had to build. Over the years that followed, Emma became a legend in her own right. She managed the trap lines successfully, made the long journey to Bear Creek each summer with furs, and negotiated fair prices. She used part of her proceeds to ensure Ruth had continued care until her aunt passed 3 years later. Jacob grew strong and healthy, a cheerful child who inherited his father's love for wilderness. Emma told him stories about Nathaniel every night. She showed him his father's journal, letting him see his father's handwriting. As Jacob grew, she took him to the grave and taught him to honor the mountain man way of life. By the time Jacob was 10, he was learning to set trap lines. Emma ensured he got education too, spending winters at Bear Creek, where a school had been established. The Crow remained important to their lives. Spotted Elk's band would arrive each spring for visiting and trading. When Jacob was 13, he participated in his first long hunt with the Crow. When he returned, he was different, more confident. "Your boy has courage," Spotted Elk told Emma. "He is worthy of his father's name." Emma turned away several marriage proposals over the years, but she felt no desire to remarry. She had experienced deep love once, brief but transformative, and she was content with its memory. One autumn day, when Jacob was 15, they climbed to Nathaniel's grave together, carrying wildflowers. Jacob placed them down, then stood silently. "I wish I could have known him," Jacob said quietly. "Really known him, not just through stories." Emma placed a hand on her son's shoulder. "You do know him," she replied. "You know him through his legacy, through these mountains, through the values he held. Every skill I've taught you came from him. When I look at you, I see him in your eyes, in your strength, in your love for this place." "Did he really love you?" Jacob asked. "Or was it just an arrangement?" Emma smiled, thinking back 16 years. "It started as an arrangement, yes," she admitted. "A desperate solution. But it became love, real and deep. Your father taught me that love doesn't always come in the package we expect. Sometimes the greatest gifts arrive disguised as practical necessities." This journey touched our hearts. "Hit subscribe for more stories like this. He gave me everything," she said softly. "Security and this beautiful life in the mountains. And you, most importantly you. He gave me freedom to become more than I ever dreamed possible. He saw something in me that I didn't see in myself." "You're already making him proud," Emma told her son. "You're becoming your own man, not just a copy of your father. That's what he would have wanted." They stood together as the sun set over the peaks. Emma thought about that day when Nathaniel had made his blunt proposal. She'd been terrified, uncertain, desperate. She'd accepted for reasons that seemed purely mercantile. But looking back now, she understood that sometimes the right path appears in unexpected forms. That cold arrangement had warmed into love. That business transaction had become a life-changing gift. That dying man's desperate gambit had given her everything that mattered. A home in wilderness she loved, a son who embodied the best of both parents, memories of love that would sustain her forever, and the knowledge of her own strength. "Thank you, Nathaniel," she whispered to the wind. "Thank you for seeing something in me I didn't see in myself. Thank you for these mountains, for our son, for teaching me what it means to be truly free. Thank you for loving me, even for such a short time." As they descended toward the cabin, Emma felt profound peace. She'd kept her promises. She'd raised Jacob to be good and strong. She'd honored Nathaniel's memory while building a life of her own. She'd survived and thrived in mountains that had claimed so many others. The mountain man's legacy lived on not just in furs and goods, not just in cabin and land, but in the woman who'd become more than she ever dreamed possible, and in the boy who carried his name and his love for wild places. And that was the greatest inheritance of all.